Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
We can meet our destiny to build a land here that will be for all mankind a shining city on a hill.
You're listening to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show, only on Revolution Radio. Now, here are your hosts, Jim White and Jason Van Tatenhove.
Crusade for freedom is your chance and mine to fight communism.
Please hang up and try again.
All right, folks, thanks for bearing with us. We are finally here. You got to love the joy of live radio and the switching of servers out at the main station. Always makes for a great time. So thank you for bearing with us. We actually have a great show up today. We have John Jacob Schmidt from Radio Free Redoubt is going to be joining us for hosting. And we also have an incredible guest coming up that has a lot of really good information about what's happening in the financial world, what's really happening and what we really need to know about. So we'll bring him on just shortly here. So Jim, John, how you doing?
We're good. I'm good, thanks. That was probably one of the longest introductions in radio history. But, hey, it's all good.
Hey.
Wow, yeah, 15 minutes. I think we got to hear it all twice.
3 times, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 times.
Well,
yeah, as Jason said, welcome everybody here to our Wednesday show. We are delighted to have the host of Radio Free Redoubt, John Jacob Schmidt, on the line with us as a co-host today. And Jason was also accurate on our guest is going to be a spectacular guest, and we're really, really excited to have Clint Richardson on the line here with us shortly. John, thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me once again, guys. It's always a pleasure. And just a reminder to everyone, we are at AMCON 4 because of the real-world threats that we are facing, what a lot of analysts are calling imminent threats from ISIS and Al-Qaeda from our southern border. So the AMRON operators are sitting up straight, paying attention to current events to be able to provide a alternative communications backbone if they are successful and disrupt that. So yeah, that's not a drill this time.
Well, sobering, John. And I think we've unfortunately had Clint waiting for a long time here. I think Clint is on the line. I want to, Jason. We still have Clint. He's
still here,
okay.
I believe. Clint, are you with us?
Yes.
Excellent. Let me give Clint a proper introduction. On the line with us, we have Clint Richardson. He's a former sound engineer and sound designer from Hollywood. He quit his profession to become a full-time activist, writer, documentary filmmaker. He met Walter Burien of Caffer1.com and produced his film, The Only Game in Town. All Clint's work is free, and the movies that can be seen free on his website and YouTube. The website is thecorporationnation.com. He also has a blog site called realityblogger.wordpress.com. The movies that he's created there's 4 of them, I believe, maybe more, 3. The Corporation Nation, The Great Pension Fund Hoax, Lethal Injection, The Story of Vaccination, and the Caffer School series. He has a film in progress right now called Citizen Enslavement, and he has his first book in progress, Straw Man, The Real Story of Your Artificial Person. And like if the guy couldn't get busy enough, he has a radio show on our public broadcasting network called The Corporation Nation, Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 Eastern. Clint Richardson, thanks so much for joining us today on the Liberty Brothers.
Absolutely. Try doing all that without a budget.
Yeah, no, we do. We do. Yeah. Clint, so thankful to have you join us today. If you could briefly go over, for those that may not be familiar with your work, and just reveal what you choose to. Just go over briefly how you got started, just a bit of background. I know we went over it briefly, but if you want to go into a little bit more detail, that'd be great.
Well, I suppose that, extraneous information aside, like I said, I quit my job there in Hollywood because I kind of figured out that I was part of the problem, the propaganda problem that we have. And it's actually a pretty disgusting place anyway there in Los Angeles when you sort of get down into the bowels of it and understand what's going on there. And so I quit a very promising career, like you said, to pursue what I'm doing now, which is pretty thankless for the most part. The first thing I did was contact this guy that I'd heard on the radio. He's the only guy that was making sense to me with all this talk about, eventually you figure out that economists are basically full of crap. It's kind of like predicting the weather. You just, it's, and then you figure out that the whole economy is a fixed entity. In other words, what we're going to be talking about today is how you can actually, show for yourself what's actually happening in the economy. And so I met Walter Burian. I had him come up and we shot a green screen film and basically did a film about what's called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which is sort of the hidden set of books. Not necessarily hidden. I call it the holy grail of accounting, which nobody knows about because they don't promote it, they don't talk about it, and they really don't use it in Congress or in your local municipalities. But there's over, I'd say, about 230,000 different government entities. In other words, corporations. If you live in a city, well, that's a municipal corporation. You live in a county, that's a municipal corporation. You live in a state, that's also a corporation. And, of course, you have the foreign federal corporation, which is also a municipality called Washington, D.C. So that's thus the title of most of my stuff comes to the corporation nation. And understanding what that means is very important because, of course, there is a difference between a government corporation and a private or public corporation, of course. One has stock and one doesn't. The important thing that we need to discuss today, though, is while people say and accuse the quote-unquote bankers of running the world, you have to realize that government is the banker. Government is the one that creates the money. The banks are private corporations or public corporations that have stock. And when you actually delve into all of this and you start understanding what's really going on, you realize that government is actually the stockholder of every corporation in the world that is public, and most of them that are private are also funded by taxpayers and by government. So this creates this sort of conflict of interest that nobody really fully comprehends because, of course, how many financial reports do you look at for corporations?
Let's break that down a little bit because that's a pretty huge statement there. You're saying that every publicly traded company out there, the big shareholder of it is the U.S. government?
Well, you have to realize there's over 200, not only in the United States, there's 230,000 different independent governments that all contribute, mostly through the pension fund system, into stock investments, also into mutual fund investments. And so that's called what's called institutional holders of stock. So if you look on any corporation, just go to Yahoo, type in finance, and go to the main shareholders, you're going to find that the main shareholders, for instance, in Microsoft, everybody would instantly say Bill Gates, yet Bill Gates only has 1%, 2% at the most of the stock in that corporation. 75% was 79% of the stockholders in that corporation are what's called institutional. Not individuals, but institutional. So Walter Burian came up with this term called, he calls it collective government. So what's the best way to hide how much investment wealth government actually has in corporations? Well, you divide it up into 230,000 different corporations, each with their own required by law financial statement called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. So if you actually want to know what's going on in your city, your county, your municipality, your school district, etc., you actually have to pull up their financial report, which is called the Caffer. Now, let me explain, just so we understand what has happened, because government, the first thing it does is create a comprehensive annual financial report every year. This is an independent audit. The Federal Reserve does it, so yes, the Federal Reserve is audited. It's a full and complete audit of everything that happens within the city. It's audited by an outside accounting firm, although that's you know, it's not saying much. The point is, it's a federal law that all governments have to do it because every government is a corporation. Also, all corporations, Target, Walmart, banks, all have separate financial reports. They call them annual reports. All right. Now, from that is created what's called the budget report. Okay, and that is what's given to the masses. That's what's given. That's what you hear about, and that's what you basically, when you go to a council meeting or when you watch your legislature in action, they're going from the budget report. So I want you to consider what the difference is between a budget report and a CAFR, a comprehensive annual financial report, the audit, in other words. Okay, CAFR is your checking account, your savings account, all of your investment wealth that you've had since the inception of your corporation. A budget is simply the checking account for the year. So what's presented to the people is the checking account. Now, let's just say that I wanted to hide a bunch of money from the IRS. And I had the same power of creative accounting that government had. Well, I would simply put all of my money in my savings account, or I would invest it like government does, and then I would show on my checking account that I have only $100, when in my investments I have $10 million. Okay, you see, but if I don't report that to the IRS and they find out, I get in trouble. But government, because it doesn't consider any investments in the actual budget reports. In other words, let's say I have $10 million left at the end of the year. All I have to do is create a liability account. What is that? It's just an investment account. I invest the money in a mutual fund or in bonds, corporate bonds, etc. And now I can show, even though I have $10 million in investments in the Caffer, on my budget, I don't have anything. I have zero balance because investments are not used in the budget. So any surplus is going to go right into an investment fund.
So you're basically telling us that the government has a lot more money than we know about out there.
I'm telling you that you live in a completely fascist, communist state and don't know it. I'm telling you that government owns it all.
Wow.
And nobody knows it.
Well, this is John Jacob Schmidt here. So basically they're double dipping because the corporations pay an income tax, and then these guys are making profit off of those corporations as well. And do these municipalities or any government corporation, do they not pay income taxes because they're not for profit?
I'm sorry, the government corporations themselves?
Well, the government, will say a city government, they invest in, let's say, Microsoft, and they get a large return on their investment.
So generally, generally your smaller governments, which are your counties, your local governments, in other words, generally they invest in some form of mutual fund. There's a thing, especially in California is the one I actually broke down. It's called the State Treasurer's Investment Fund. So most of the municipalities, including counties and cities, and school districts will set up an authority, which is basically a big insurance investment fund, and they'll invest in that. Cities and counties will invest in the State Treasurer's Investment Fund. You can find that in the Caffer. And what that is called a commingled fund. And so the California State Treasurer comptroller is basically in charge of a massive multi-billion-dollar fund. I remember it being up to about $60 or $70 billion last time I looked. And so that's all of the extra investment money, or some of it, I should say, that municipalities contribute to a single fund. And see, what's important about this, and then that state treasurer's fund starts investing in federal securities, bonds, etc. And the money is eventually, it's basically one giant pool. Now, the way this works, and I sent Jim, I sent you a copy of the CalPERS pension fund.
I did. I looked it over and I was astounded. The trillions of dollars that are in there. Trillions.
It's quite amazing. And CalPERS is much bigger than that. That's just the CalPERS for the state employees. CalPERS became an international corporation in the 80s, and it had trillions of dollars back then. And so you can imagine how large it is offshore. And they've induced all the governments to actually invest with them offshore in a way that they don't have to show it on their books. So there's a lot more wealth out there, and you got to stop thinking of it in dollar terms as much as in ownership of things. So your government is especially these pension funds, but all governments basically, they have metals, they have foreign currency, they have the real estate holdings. If you look through the whole report, you'll find amazing amounts of real estate that they hold and either rent out or whatever. Bonds, corporate bonds. Corporate bonds are very important because, see, people don't realize that your taxpayer money, again, the way to keep it off budget, in other words, the way that the government is set up through private associations mostly, all of your government officials are members of private associations, non-governmental, that then induce the rules and regulations of accounting. So you have your mayor's association, you have your national governors association, you have financial accountants, the GFOA, Government Financial Officers Association, and that's where all this creative accounting comes from, a bunch of attorneys, of course. So you have to realize that most of your taxpayer money stays off the budget report because they invest all of that money in so many different ways. It would take a whole show just to go over the different types of investments. One of the most important ones, though, is what's called corporate bonds. So I did a paper here, and this might help explain. Again, this is from CalPERS, the 2011 Annual Investment Report. If you type in CalPERS, CALPERS, Annual Investment Report, you will get a list, and you can click that. It's a PDF. You can go through CalPERS investment, and like you said, it's astounding to actually see. So in 2011, CalPERS has 4.58 million shares of just Morgan Stanley at a listed book value of $98 million and a market value of $105 million. It also has JP Morgan Chase, 11.5 million shares of JP Morgan Chase with a market value of $472 million. All right, that's just two banks, and that's over $500,000 of value just in those banks. Government doesn't care about the dollar. You know, you talk about the dollar crash all the time. What it cares about is turning the dollar into real wealth. The dollar is not real wealth. The dollar is nothing but a debt certificate, basically. So you turn the dollar into real wealth by basically gouging the public without them even knowing it. Walter Burien says it best. He says the best way to steal money and steal value from the population is if the population has no idea it exists in the first place. So when you look at this CalPERS report, for instance, you know, these are the kind of things you'll see. I mean, think about that, 11.5 million shares in just JP Morgan Chase. Those are direct ownership shares.
Let me stop you for a second. If I could just, to get this in my own mind, I know I spoke to you. Let me see if I'm accurate on this. So they take taxpayer dollars and they invest it in the stock market and other things, and then they claim that they have no money and they're broke, yet they have trillions of dollars in the stock market, really, that's basically owned by the citizens, correct? I mean, that's our money that they took to invest, so any gains should be ours. Is that, am I not accurate? Am I wrong?
We like to think of the dollar as our own, but in fact, it's actually copyrighted script of the Treasury through the Federal Reserve. So really, it's not our money. It's a public thing. We, you know, to say that the public actually owns the money, you know, in my research and my understanding, is an incorrect assumption. We're allowed to use it. You know, this is why my next documentary is called Citizen Enslavement, because we literally are debt slaves, according to according
to how the Federal Reserve set up. I mean, those dollars just represent debt, don't they? I mean, they don't really. Yeah. There is no intrinsic value behind them.
Right. So you're turning that debt. I mean, there is. It's collateralized. There's actually 238 million troy ounces of gold that are collateralized. The difference between what it used to be and is today is that the gold just sits there, and the treasury issues gold certificates, basically, and those gold certificates are traded. The gold actually is set at a statutory price of $42.29, and this is all in the Federal Reserve Caffer and the federal Caffer, and so the gold was pledged to the Federal Reserve to collateralize the dollar. But the dollar is also collateralized by basically all of you and your property. There's several congressional quotes having to do with the 1933, the Banking Act back then, that verify that say the dollar is worth 100 cents on the dollar because it's backed by the people and their property, basically. So it does have an intrinsic value. It's just sort of it represents basically it's slavery in an ancient system of pledging, basically, is what we refer to it. But if we actually go and we look, okay, just to clear this up, so government invests in Morgan Stanley and J.P. Morgan Chase. But when we look further in the report into CalPERS, type in there and search for what else have we actually invested in these two corporations. You see domestic cash equivalents, which are securities, at $39 million and $66 million. You have asset-backed securities, which, by the way, mortgage-backed securities, guess who holds all of those? It's government, folks. Government is the main holder of most asset-backed securities, including mortgage-backed securities. All that toxic debt, guess where it's held? It's held by you, technically by your government. You have several listings here with total value of $1.8 billion, $1.89 billion actually, just in those two companies. You have corporate bonds. So this is the important part. Corporate bonds in the value of $283 million just to Morgan Stanley and J.P. Morgan Chase. Now, what a corporate bond is simply a loan, okay? So that means that your CalPERS has loaned the banks over $283 million in corporate bonds. So you're actually, and this is just those two companies. This is, if you look in the CalPERS report, you'll see that it has stock investment in every single foreign corporation out there. See, people mistake the thought that China is becoming a massive power that is separate from the United States. But when you actually look, the United States funded China. They funded Russia. They funded Mexico when it was built up. All these corporations that are in China, you'll look and you'll see that CalPERS has a massive share. And then you look at the New York pension fund, and you look at the Texas pension funds, and you look at the teachers' pet funds, and you start adding those up, and then you take into consideration all of the mutual funds. Now, mutual funds are a little difficult because you can't get a printout of who the shareholders are. It's out there, but it's not allowed to mere peons like myself. But you actually see who the main main investor in pension fund or mutual funds is. It's always the institutional investors. To give you another example, there's mortgage-backed securities in the amount of over $1 billion. So yeah, your government is funding all that toxic debt and making a fortune from it. International debt securities of $4 million. It just goes on and on and on.
Clint, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
We hear so often from alternative media and the mainstream media that we are in a false economy, and that it cannot go on. With what you're saying, is that correct, or is there a lot more money in the system than we are even aware of, and will continue to play out, I guess, as it has been?
Well, yeah, like I said, everybody focuses on money. But what is real wealth? Is a debt instrument real wealth? Absolutely not. But it's a means to an end. It's a tool that government created. And back in the 1940s, it started doing this whole investment scheme thing. And it's been investing in everything under the sun since. And it's at the point now, like I said, where the dollar like I said, it's just a tool. It's a means to an end to collect real wealth. What is real wealth? It's real estate. It's stock ownership in corporations. It's gold and silver. It's all of these different things. You see, so we are left with the dead instrument. We are left with nothing. Government has taken everything, all of our productivity, all of our currency in the form of our labor. Everything is taken from us. We don't own our property. We're listed as tenants. We get big bank loans and we go into debt. We have nothing left. Government literally owns everything of value. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has a lot of cash lying around, because cash is, I don't want to say it's worthless to government, but they know that cash doesn't actually represent real wealth. We need to learn that and understand that the dollar is a trap. So, you know, I can only stress this enough. The budget report is the dumbed-down version of the Caffer, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. The Caffer is available to you if you want to spend a year or 2 years like I did trying to read the thing and understand what's happening and putting all this together. But so let's talk about what happens in Congress for a good example. So, you know, the legislature meets, and what do? They talk about the budget. Now, the Caffer is sitting there. It has all these massive investments, but they are not allowed by their own rules, their own laws. Remember, you know, above all else, Congress is the creator of everything. It is the destroyer of everything. It is the end-all, be-all. Everything that happens is because of Congress. So their little act that they play, you know, we found out that through a Caffer of theirs, that they have an average of a $4 million tax-exempt expense account per senator, and then, of course, each congressman. So, you know, they'll tell you, well, we don't get paid very much to do this. You know, we're heroes because we do this for very little pay, and yet here they are sitting on a multi-million-dollar expense account that they can use for anything they want. So there's a lot of information that is hidden from the public that can only be viewed in the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Sometimes it's called financial statements or audited financial statements or annual report. But it's the everything. It's all the investments. Like I said, now the Congress will get together and they'll say, well, okay, here's our selectively hand-picked budget report. Guess what? It's showing that we're in debt. We're in the red. So we're going to have to create new taxes. We're going to have to do all of this. Meanwhile, they're sitting on massive amounts of real wealth. We're all hypnotized out here thinking, oh, the dollar amount is you know, not there. Well, that's because they took all the wealth, all the taxpayer money that they collect, that's not structured for the use to create, you know, taxpayer needs, and they put it in investment accounts because investment accounts aren't on the budget. You see? So, yeah, like I said, we're all sitting out here talking about money and the dollar and how the dollar is going to crash. Meanwhile, they're sitting on the whole entire cash crop of stock certificates, of gold and silver, of foreign currency. They're hedging everything. So, if there's anything I want you to get from this, it is that there's not two sets of books, but there might as well be. There's the Caffer, which is the full book. And then there's the budget report, which is given to the masses, given to what they call the common people who don't spend the time or put the pain in to actually learn what's happening. And that's what they put on this whole stage show. They even have the Federal Reserve pretend like it has power over government, even though Congress created it and can destroy it at any time. They pretend like the Federal Reserve is this all-powerful being. Meanwhile, government is sitting on the stock investment of every corporation in the world. Now, one more thing that's very important so that you understand how this is working. Now, we look at, say, the BP oil spill or the Exxon Valdez oil spill, and we say, why isn't government forcing this corporation to clean up this spill? Well, think about it for a moment. Why are banks allowed to do such horrible things? Well, think about it for a moment. If government is both the main investor in a severe conflict of interest and the regulator of those corporations and what they can do to us, Well, the sky's the limit, folks. I mean, this is organized crime we're talking about. Government is literally organized crime. So they're going to allow those banks to do the most horrible, horrible things. They're going to give them the power to make more money to increase the stock value of the main stockholder, which is
because they own
government.
shares. They own shares in it. That's why.
Right. So,
John, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm processing all of this. See, of course, I'm not an economic expert, but these municipal governments, for them to have pension funds and benefits for the retirees, I could see this is a sensible thing to take part of their wages that they agree. Part of this comes out of their wages, and then the city or the county matches it, and then they.
Well, why is that reasonable?
Well, I would say to invest that and let the invest in a corporation, let the profitability from that corporation profit from that.
Let me ask you this: if you were a pensioner, right, and you know what you know, would you want the government to invest in Monsanto? Let's say Microsoft. How about Raytheon? The Carlyle Group. Would you want that? Would you want your investment wealth to go towards that just so you can get a measly pension payout at the end of your life? Is that worse?
I'm playing both. I'm playing both sides of this in my mind.
So let me explain.
Obviously, I would want to choose who I invest in. But see, that's a problem. Even if you work with a private corporation and you have their 401k, most of the times you have very limited say on where that package your corporation is investing.
So this is the most important part that pensioners need to understand. Now, pensioners are the biggest ones to cry out about welfare. Now, welfare. Keep in mind that it's probably $200-300 billion is spent on actual welfare, food stamps, etc. When it comes to taxpayer contributions, that is non-employee contributions into the pension system. The pension system is the bread and butter of government investments. You got to understand this, and this goes for Canada, this goes for the UK, this goes for every country out there. They're all in doing this because and what they call the pension is a scheme. Okay, the insurance is a scheme. Officially, it's called a scheme. All right, so pensioners need to understand that they are not the main investor in the pension funds. Okay, for the reason government wants so much bureaucracy and so many redundancy and so many employees is because for every employee, they somehow justify contributing into a pension fund. Mm-hmm. All right, so you're talking just to the federal pension system. Over $1 trillion every year is put into just the federal pension system, and that has nothing to do with the pensioners themselves. That is all taxpayer money. Meanwhile, we're complaining that the very much impoverished people of the land are receiving food stamps. And we're paying maybe $100 billion for that. Then you take all of the local and state pension funds and you keep adding on to this. It gets into the trillions of dollars of taxpayer money that are going into pension funds. Now, is that in order to pay the benefits of the employees? Well, you tell me. Does it take for CalPERS? Does it take $256 billion of investments to pay $10 billion in the benefits that are paid out? If you actually take the contributions by the employees, they pay for themselves. Everything else is simply for investment.
Okay, now, and also the other problem is that I see is that even if they did do it on the level, the benefits packages and the retirement packages that people in the public sector make the private sector benefits pale in comparison across the board. I mean, what they get in their benefits packages, their health care, all of that is so out of balance with what's in the private sector, even if they did everything above board. But what you're saying is, okay, so who directly benefits in a municipal corporation, and how do they benefit by these massive returns on these investments?
Well, the municipalities basically have their hands tied. They form a corporation, a municipal corporation, and they have to follow the rules of the associations that a government allows to make the rules. Okay, so basically they have a strict guideline that they follow, and all the money basically gets funneled out into these, like I said, these commingled funds and et cetera. So they are not necessarily getting the benefit of that in as much as the corporations and banks are getting a lot of benefit out of that. You should see the amount of fees, return check fees, et cetera, that banks are getting to actually do the investment for us. But government doesn't do the investing itself. It hires banks to be the investors. So you'll see millions and millions and millions of dollars just to pay bank fees and service fees for these investors. The whole thing, you got to understand, this is a mutually beneficial structure for corporations and government. But most importantly, you have to understand that everything is literally owned, because the only way you can own a corporation, banks can't own government. Government can own, because government has no stock. So you can't own a government, but you can create a system that is, like I said, mutually beneficial. Now, here is the most important aspect of this. This, again, above all else, you got to understand. Now, again, we go back to the value of money versus the value of real wealth, which are these stock certificates, etc. Now, what CalPERS does, and you can read this, and all of the other investment funds, any mutual fund, etc., that has a quite large amount of stock in any corporation, does what's called proxy shareholder voting. Okay, so that the way most corporations, private or public corporations, are set up is that the shareholders elect the CEO. Now, government's not so interested in the CEO because it controls the shareholders, because it's the main investor. So it pools all of its votes. So CalPERS will get together with other pension funds. They have private associations that pool all of their votes as proxy shareholders. What do shareholders vote for? They vote for such things as mergers and acquisitions. If you look at all the banks, for instance, that got merged and acquiesced back in the so-called 2008, 2009, the banking emergency or whatever, those were all government-owned corporations that they voted to merge. Bank of America and Merrill Lynch. Let's merge those and make it easier for us. This is all being voted on by the stockholders. Who are the stockholders? Mutual associations that vote on behalf of government, who is the main shareholder. You got to understand that they pool their shareholder votes in order to have authority over the board of directors of each corporation. If they don't like what the CEO is doing, they vote to tell the board of directors to get rid of the CEO. So our opinion and our perception of what corporations are must be corrected so that we understand what is actually happening out there, is that government controls those corporations. It also regulates those corporations. It votes for its board of directors, who in turn vote for the CEO. It's a complete system of not only conflict of interest, but of control. It is literally the definition of fascism, which is state ownership of corporations.
I was just going to say, you have fascism.
Yeah. Go ahead. I was going to say, go ahead, John.
I lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
Well,
Sorry, Jim.
I just want to say something real quick. It sounds to me, real quick, I just want to throw this in. When governments do the bailouts like they did, they're really bailing themselves out as well.
Absolutely. What is a bailout? I mean, government creates money. I mean, a lot of people don't understand the way the loan system works in banks even. I mean, if you're going to create a bond or you're going to create a loan, the bank doesn't loan any of its own money. It creates the money on the spot. This is according to the Federal Reserve.
Fractional reserve banking.
Exactly. So you go in, you get a loan. You think that the bank is somehow loaning your own money, but by the time you get your money, the bank's at a zero balance. It has only acted as a middleman for you to create money. And you're foolish enough to sign a contract that says, I'm going to put my house up for collateral, even though the bank had nothing to do with it, and because the bank didn't loan me any money, and I'm going to go on a payment schedule to pay principal and interest over the next 30 years, okay? Now, that contract is worth, let's say you got a $500,000 house, a loan, and then you have interest payments that are going to total almost $1 million. What does the bank do? Have you ever noticed? Every loan out there gets sold after a mandatory 45-day waiting period. Now, why in the world would a bank sell a contract that's worth $1 million? Well, okay. The contract itself is basically worthless at the moment. In 30 years, it'll pay almost $1 million. So in 45 days, they can sell that contract. They say, hey, Bank of America, this is Citibank talking, hey, Bank of America, why don't you buy this contract today? It's worth $1 million over 30 years, but we're going to sell it to you for the low, low price of $500,000. So Bank of America gives Citibank $500,000. Citibank has made an almost instant, in 45 days, basically, $500,000. Now, Bank of America has a $1 million contract that it bought for $500,000. All right, so it has a financial asset that in the future is worth this much. It goes either back to Citibank or to one of its affiliates or to another bank, and it says, hey, why don't you buy this for $600,000? Bank of America now makes an instant $100,000 profit. That bank sells it, that bank sells it, and that bank sells it, and eventually it goes to a bank that is planned to fail. Okay, all the toxic debt, because now eventually the contract worth $1 million is being sold for a very high price. Meanwhile, the banks have hypothecated that particular contract to where they've gotten $2 or $3 million of value out of that future. And at this point, it doesn't matter if the people default on the actual contract. They're just going to take the house.
All right, well, we're coming up on the hard break, folks. Stick with us. We'll be back on the other side.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
All right, and welcome back to Hour 2. You are here with us. This is the Liberty Brothers Radio Show, and I am here with my usual host, Jim White, and we also have guest host John Jacob Schmidt joining us from Radio Free Redoubt. And
yes,
we are also talking with Clint Richardson, who is an author. He's a filmmaker. He's got his own radio show. He's a blogger. He's doing so many different things, really exposing what's really happening with the sham of the financial system and the corporate structure. Before we get back to all that, we need to really encourage people. Folks, we really have a good thing here with Revolution Radio. We may have our slip-ups that we have with live radio, but we are the largest listener-supported internet radio station out there. And we really need your help to stay on the air. So please, if you have just a few bucks, you have $5, get online, go to freedomslips.com, click on the donate button, help keep all this great programming coming. We're growing by leaps and bounds, and that bandwidth costs money, folks. So please do your part. We're out here every day bringing on great guests, bringing you great information. And if you like it, please help keep it around. So, all right, let's get back to the discussion here. So we were, before the break, you were kind of breaking down things. Let's get back to that as far as the pensions go, and kind of go from there.
Well, one of the questions you guys asked off air refers to pensioners. You know, pensioners are very protective of their pensions. But see, what pensioners can, and they can verify this, what pensioners actually are what is called contributors. Okay, now I used the example of the Red Cross. If I contribute money to the Red Cross, can I go to the Red Cross a few years later and demand that they pay that money back to me plus interest because they invested? And by the way, Red Cross does the same exact thing. They invest most of the money that you contribute. All these major charities, they're basically just schemes for investment. They contribute, they invest in basically an insurance scheme. Same kind of investments, and then they show to the people that they need more money, and they spend most of the extra money on pledge drives and trying to get more money to feed the investment scheme. Meanwhile, people are starving and are homeless and etc. So the whole charity scheme, the nonprofit scheme, is very much a part of this same type of investment scheme. Most of them I would not support. There's very few charities I would actually support that actually do good work. And one of those, just to get a kick in, is that there's. I'm not big on corporations at all, especially religious corporations. But the Methodist Church has a charity that is called UMCOR, United Methodist Committee on Relief. 100% of the money, I verified this myself. 100% of the money actually goes towards the help of people. None of it is used for the running. It's all voluntary. The other one that I like that actually supports people and employs people is an animal charity. It's actually in Utah. It's called Best Friends. And they're really expanding, and they're trying to get basically a no-kill policy in every state. Those are the two charities that I look at and I say, wow, these are real charities, and they're few and far between. As far as United Way, government-supported ones, Red Cross, if you knew what Red Cross was, you'd probably be a little concerned, because Red Cross is actually it's a military
like a CIA front, right? They're like a CIA front, Red Cross.
Well, you got to understand, underneath all of this, the United States, each state is a militarily occupied country, basically, under the Lieber Code. So, I mean, that's a whole other subject. So the reason you have a military base in every state, it's because we're an occupied country, just like we still occupy Germany, we still occupy Japan, and do horrible things over there. That's a whole nother subject that we don't need to get into, but that'll be part of my my next movie. But as far as the pensioners go, again, you're a contributor. You contribute money. In other words, you're buying a ticket to ride the train of the pension fund. Now, if that state declares bankruptcy, just like any other private corporation, that money is gone because you've contributed to the fund with the hope.
We saw that in Detroit. Sorry to interrupt you. We saw that in Detroit, right? That's a good example. All those pensioners lost all their money on pensions in Detroit. Is that accurate?
Sure. Well, I mean, they certainly lost quite a bit. Yeah, I don't think they got rid of the fund last time I checked, but they did rape it. And that's important to understand, is you don't have any actual equity in the pension system. The whole pension system is designed as an investment scheme for government. It collects, every employee you hire, again, government then puts taxpayer money into the pension system and then invests all that money. Those investments really have nothing to do with the pension system itself. In other words, they don't necessarily need that. It's using otherwise good-willed and good-hearted people to basically establish this whole investment scheme. And they've been doing it for a very long time.
I have a couple of questions then. First of all, at the county level or city, say, any government corporate level, who is in charge of transferring money to these investment and drawing money out for the retirees and so on? What office would do that?
It depends on which level. At the state level, it's the comptroller or the treasurer is actually the pension system or the commingled fund system. All of the investments is actually in a trust that is under the treasury of the state, and ultimately everything is under federal law. So, I mean, ultimately everything is federalized already. So when you get down to the county and the city level, it's a very interesting dichotomy at that level, because what happens is because, again, it's a corporation. You have the city council. One of my friends, actually, her name's Mel Hallett. She does radio as well, but she got elected through a very, very hard battle into her city council in Colorado, I believe she is. And she basically found out that if you don't, you're offered all of these benefits and perks and everything, and if you don't accept and you don't play along with the rest of the council, you're what's called an outlayer. You aren't cooperating with the status quo. You're not fulfilling the need for consensus. You're not doing what needs to be done, and therefore you're called an outlayer. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to be an outlayer because then you'll be forced out, basically. So that's what she's dealing with. Most cities, if you actually read again, this is all public information. If you actually read your city charter or your county charter, it has all this information in there. Most of them are set up as a council and city manager deal. So the council is really just there to vote things in. All of the laws and all of the things that actually happen are done by appointed officials that the council actually appoints. So your city manager is not an elected official, and yet the city manager has most of the power in your local government. The council simply is there to say yes or no, and of course they receive different types of what you might call clandestine benefits. Well, our council here I'm in Utah, just below Salt Lake. Our council here is so corrupt I don't even know where to begin. But we found out, for instance, they're eminent domaining property and getting kickbacks for that. They'll buy property up, build houses, then eminent domain the already built houses in order to build something else on the property. Then they know that this is going to happen. You see, the whole point is not the cost of the houses, the money involved to build the houses, because that's all done through bonds. That's creating money again. Right. You have to always consider the story of the phoenix. You have to destroy and rebuild, destroy and rebuild, destroy and rebuild. You have a constant corporations. The main job of corporation is to satiate the shareholders. Well, in this case, the main job of the municipal corporations is to satiate the federal government, basically, to accept all the federal monies, to create through corporate bonds, to put a Walmart in. When you see a new building or a new strip mall or a new massive mega center, Target, whatever, most of that money is coming through what's called corporate bonds that we just talked about, which are bonds or loans that are made to corporations through commingled funds and through pension funds. So you got a new Walmart coming to a town near you? Well, guess what? You're paying for it. You don't know it, but you're paying for it.
Wow.
Okay, so let's take a county government, for example. They come to the people. They're pleading for money because they got to replace a bridge and do some other things, and it's going to cost $10 million, and they don't have the money. They're talking about putting out bonds and things like that.
Sure.
How many of these county commissioners, for example, are unaware of this scheme going on? And is there do you have a model for an educating process? So instead of tapping the people for more money, making them aware that this is there so they can address it and knock these things down, and pull the money from those resources, because a lot of people, there's some good people within the community. Jim the roofer gets a job, or he runs for office and he gets in. He's now a county commissioner, and so there's an education process there. How do we? Because I'm looking for solutions.
Well, it's sort of a trap, because if you start talking about this as a councilman or as someone in government, you will lose. You will be voted out, forced out. Things happen to people who talk about this. We tried to get, for instance, and I hate to burst people's bubble, but there is no good person in government technically, because it's organized crime. No matter how you look at it, it's organized crime, and eventually you will figure that out.
Well, I would
probably within the first days.
I will say that there's a few that have gotten in, and are soon to be out. We have a good group of constitutional sheriffs. I've been involved in local politics, but I know that once you get into the system, you're absolutely right. It just seems to be a losing battle. Unfortunately, it seems like everything you're saying, it's the little guy, it's us who really are the big losers. So really, I think the most important question we got right now is, you've got all this doom and gloom. Really, what can we do? John Jacob Schmidt, hit it. What can we do?
It's not doom and gloom. It's just reality. You know, you can't say this is good or bad. It just is.
Well,
now, how you treat it is different. Now, most people hear this. It's so overwhelming. The scope and size of the money involved is so humongous. The nature of the fascism is so against their American dream notions of what America is that they don't want to do anything about it. That's the problem that most people have. They're hypnotized by shiny trinkets or what the popular disinfo agents out there are telling them. Reality is not that much fun. It's not as exciting as an economist telling you that everything's going to crash. Well, tell me this: how is everything going to crash if government owns it all? I mean, that's the question you have to ask.
Does the government have a plan in place that they want to put forward that includes a crash? You know, something that's premeditated.
Well, the government owned it all in the Weimar Republic too, and in Venezuela and Chile and every place else. Sometimes they get in over their heads and they can't hold it up anymore, and sometimes it's intended to usher in a new system.
Sure, and the difference between the past history and current history is technology. We have military bases in I believe 192, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, we are the military ruler of the world, and you look at the treaties that have been signed. Your Tammy Pepperman turned me on to the Westphalia Treaty, which basically said all the nations got together and said, okay, whoever gets ahead there, we'll pretend like they're the ruler. I mean, it's one big giant, like I said, organized criminal syndicate. Syndicate is a very interesting word. You should look it up in the old dictionaries.
Oh yeah,
and you'll understand what a syndicate really is, and that we have one.
I do.
So, really what this boils down to is the fact that we are participating and contributing to this whole system. Now, Walter Burien came up with quite a brilliant solution to this, and he is trying to form his own little sort of association to get counties and cities, any venue at all, school districts, whatever, to first of all get the taxpayers get an initiative basically on the ballot to have the people actually vote, and they can vote in what he calls his tax retirement fund, which is basically like a pension fund, but except instead of the paying pensioners or paying off government, the actual investment fund itself would go to pay all of the needs of the taxpayer. So you don't need taxpayer funding when you have investment wealth covering everything. If you look at the pension funds, the amount of return on their investments pays for all the benefits they pay to their employees. So everything the employees, give to the fund is not even necessary. Like I said, if you close down Caffer, let me give you an example of how this works. If you were to close down CalPERS or CalSTRS or the New York Pension Fund or any of the pension funds, the public pension funds, especially the larger ones, if you were to close it down, sell all the investments, CalPERS would have $250 or so billion just sitting there. Okay, at that point, it would sit there and collect interest. After 20 years, maybe 30 years, you'd actually run that down by paying the $9 or $10 billion it takes to actually pay the obligations to pensioners. Okay, that is the truth about pension funds. They're not in trouble. They're not. There's so much money. There's so much wealth, I should say, in investments that there is no. The whole crisis, the whole concept that things are crashing, all you have to do is say, oh, well, we're only looking at our checking account. We're not looking at all the investments of government. So the answer to your question, as far as the end game of government, I would say is to, yes, pretend that there is a crisis like they're doing, pretend that there is a budget shortfall like they're doing, and eventually fool us into ending the Federal Reserve and replacing it with the World Bank incrementally. Not, I wouldn't say there's going to be
So do you think the Federal Reserve's a good thing?
No, absolutely not. A central bank is one of the planks of the Communist Manifesto. And if you haven't noticed, the Communist Manifesto, the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto are law in the United States.
Complete.
Absolute. So, no, the Federal Reserve has a lot of patriot myths, I like to call them, surrounding it. I've written extensively and did a lot of research into that to basically either prove or disprove what I was hearing from your G. Edward Griffins and your Alex Joneses. And most of the stuff about the Federal Reserve is absolutely untrue. I can send you my research on that. You can post it for people. Ron Paul, complete scam, complete fraud.
Really?
Because I did the research. I did my due diligence. I spent years learning about the Caffer. We challenged Ron Paul. Ron Paul, why aren't you telling people that there's an audit of the Fed? It's called the Caffer. I mean, you can read about it on the damn Federal Reserve website. Why aren't you telling people? It's downloadable. It's 538 pages of pure information. It tells you right there that all the money collected as interest on the Federal Reserve notes goes right back to the Treasury. It tells you that the Federal Reserve, when you say it's an independent agency of government, well, there's like 100 independent agencies of government. Independence is a political word. It doesn't mean naturally independent. Like it means like the post office is called an independent agency of government. Social Security Administration, Securities and Exchange, they're all independent because Congress doesn't have time to run all these things. That's what independent means. It doesn't mean that it's not under Congress or under, Go read the Federal Reserve Act, for God's sake.
So do you think that these people, Alex Jones and Ron Paul, especially a big one, because I got to say I was a county coordinator for Ron Paul, and I get a lot of my information there. And to be honest with you, assuming that to a large degree that what he's putting out there is correct. Do you think
we challenged Ron Paul over and over and over. Walter Buren's a very well-known gentleman. We challenged him over and over to place the Caffer upon his website, tell people about the audit of the Fed. He would not. He would not.
So do you think they're willingly putting out this information, or do you think it's just they don't know any better?
Well, when you're a 28-year term congressman, you don't talk about the Caffer. You don't talk about the Caffer. If you want to preserve your multi-million-dollar expense account, if you want to preserve your political power, if you want to, you don't talk about the Caffer. You'll notice it's never talked about in Congress, and when it is, it's huge. It's huge news because people, it's like, holy crap, someone actually talked about the Caffer. Guy in Oregon talked about it once, and he said. And all he had to do was mention it, and the whole issue went away. They wanted to raise taxes to create something. He said, well, wait a minute. We have $4 billion sitting here in investments. Why aren't we using that? And he was, of course, a new congressman. Why aren't we using that to pay for this? Whole issue went away. It never got talked about again. I'm not sure if he's still a congressman.
He got pulled to the side and had a little talking to by the gray hairs.
It's a good old boys club.
Is this the type of information that they want suppressed so much that people disappear when they start talking about it?
Well, I mean, like I said, to me, it's the holy grail of government accounting, and it's an open secret, the best kept open secret there is. So I would say yes. People end up with rape charges or getting caught with prostitutes, any way to get them kicked out. So and again, if you want to see this in action, you just search, for God's sake, search the newspapers for talk about the Caffer. When Detroit and when Stockton, I wrote about a 240-page thing on just the Stockton Caffer. It's called the Stockton Bankruptcy Life. You really want to learn how your municipality works, that's the one you should read. It's huge. It's long. It's on my blog. But basically, the whole thing is a lie. Every municipality out there, every county, every state, and the federal government, tomorrow, all they have to do is cash in their investments, and they can pay off all debt and be completely debt-free tomorrow. If they wanted to, and if there weren't private associations and laws and regulations that won't allow them to. You see, because government, you asked earlier about bonds, when they create bonds in the municipality, guess who's funding those bonds? It's other governments. Government borrows from itself. When you look at the national debt, most of that debt is government borrowing from government. It's ridiculous when you think about it.
I'm still trying to figure out how somebody would directly benefit from that would motivate them to continue to go along with that program.
Well, it's their multi-million dollar expense accounts, John, and it's all these legislators' pensions as well. They don't want to cut their own nose off.
No, on the municipal level,
like Clint said, even if you stop contributions to that today, the thing would last 15 to 20 years. That's with interest. I mean, with the cost of living increase, factored in, say 15 years without adding any more to it. So they're actually in so much gross excess, and they're crying for more money.
The answer
how does somebody benefit?
The answer to your question is that yes, a lot of the councilmen, a lot of people in government do not fully comprehend what the Caffer is. They've heard about it. They vote for it. It'll be mentioned once a year because it has to be accepted and voted in by the council. Because remember, the councils are yes men. They say yes, budget's good, thank you, and so they hear about it once a year. I've had several council people in my local area contact me. I've met with them. I've explained it to them, and then I'll never hear from them again, because they will either say "Holy crap," or they'll try and do something about it, and they'll realize there's so much flack and so much resistance to this. It's not supposed to be talked about. And you know how it is when you're an employee for a corporation. There are things that you don't talk about. Mm-hmm. Every corporation has it. I've got an idea that would make this better. Everybody else is going to tell you, shut up. We like our long breaks. We like the fact that we don't have to work the whole time. If you introduce something that makes us more efficient, we're going to lose our hours, or they're going to start firing people. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is how the corporate world works. So you get into a situation where you're a councilman. Again, they aren't doing hardly anything as a council. They're meeting. They're hearing consensus arguments that are usually presented by Agenda 21 type of agencies. They're using the Delphi technique to not allow people like me to get up and speak.
Yes.
Right? So they are just there as yes men. They're there to make a vote and make something happen. Everything else that they do, they contract out. They hire people. They hire the city managers. City managers in charge of the budgeting and the Caffer. So they don't even have anything to do with the accounting structure. They're not accountants.
And they hire consulting firms that are experts in their fields. So there's no accountability. Hey, we paid all this money for this consulting firm. They guided us. We went with their recommendation, and then so they're not the bad guys. It's somebody else who's come and gone.
Well, and a lot of times, even with newer people that have just been elected, I can speak on this because I've worked in county politics quite a bit, getting people elected, and they really don't know what's going on when they do get elected.
That's right.
And it's usually up to the people that are already part of that system to kind of take them under their wing and teach them what's going on. And we kind of need to look at that too and start training people.
The problem with that is that there are, again, private associations that come in, according to Mel, who just got elected this year. They come in, they hand you a pamphlet or a booklet that says, welcome, you're now a councilman, this is what you should do, you should cooperate, you should do all these things. If you don't cooperate, you're an outlier, you're not part of the good boys club, you're going to be, so they're greeted not by their council members so much, but by these insurance agencies that ensure that they're going to do the thing that they're wanted. That they vote yes when they should be voting no, basically. So
it sounds like it's just like all a fraud, Clint.
It is.
It sounds like it's all a giant game being played on us. It's just a big fraud.
Jim, don't you have it'sallafraud.com?
I do have it'sallafraud.com.
Maybe you need to use that to start publishing.
I do. I own that URL. It's allafraud.com. Yeah, because it is all a fraud.
Absolutely. And that's an understatement. I mean, the whole government itself is, well, what is it? It's a fiction, right? So every time you ask anything about government, you wonder why things happen in government. You have to ask the right question. You know, what is a lie in a fiction? If you look up the word lie in some of the older dictionaries, believe it or not, because it's a legal dictionary, the word lie means to exist. To exist, to subsist, is to lie. Okay, so, you know, you start looking at the language, the etymology of words, and you really study the legal language, you realize you're looking in the looking glass, you're looking in a mirror, and every word means something opposite than the common language, which they refer to it as the vulgar or vernacular language that we use, language of emotion and love. Well, in the legal language, all the words are completely opposite of each other. That's what we talk about a lot on my show, actually. In fact, I just did a 2-day show on the etymology of the word education and all the words that go along with that.
Tell our listeners a little bit about your show and where they can catch it.
It's Republic Broadcasting Network, which is republicbroadcasting.org. And it's the Corporation Nation, of course. It's Eastern time. It's 8 to 10. And I don't know. We talk about the Caffer a little bit. We talk about the Bible. We break down the actual Bible a lot because it has a lot to do with. Well, let's just say that the Bible is completely opposite of what churches talk about. It's pretty amazing, actually, the information and the knowledge inside the Bible, even to a non-religious person, is incredible.
No, we talk about that quite a bit as well.
About that, yeah. And then we talk about legal stuff. I have a weekly guest that we talk about general legal concepts.
Let me ask you this. You came from a sound engineering production background in Hollywood. How did you make the leap from that background to being so well versed in economics and finding your way around these statistics and figuring all this out? I mean, it almost seems like you have a background in economics, but
it would seem like that, but I don't actually. Like I said, I've put in the pain, I've put in the due diligence over the last full time over the last 7 years to get to the point where I can fully see everything and understand it. And literally, I do what most people cannot do. I don't have a family, so I don't have kids to support. I fortunate enough to have some friends that actually. Like one friend will take me to Costco every month and say, go at it, and I get to buy some organic food and stuff. I'm very, very poor. I'm very content with what I do have. And I spend my full time basically researching, trying to understand the whole thing. And most people can't do that. Most people don't have the luxury, which, in my case, luxury is fortunate to have food every day. Most people don't have the capability of doing what I've done. I just decided when I actually quit, I was making $35 an hour, basically doing film and video games and commercials. My last project was Resident Evil, which was just purely demonic video game series, And I was the lead designer on that. And I just, in the middle of it, I said, after this project, I'm done. I went around and asked some of my fellow designers, some of which were devout Christians, what they thought about designing all these, demons. And they said, I have a family, I got to support it, so I'm going to do it. Just like everybody else out there. There's some excuse why they'll sell their soul, basically. And I decided I didn't want to sell my soul, and I quit. First thing I did, like I said, was contact Burien because he didn't have any budget. No one was supporting him, yet he's on these, major radio shows telling people this information. So I helped him out. I did all the sound production on that for free, hired somebody for free to do the video, and we made a movie. And then I started making my own movies. I learned how to do video on my own, which is why my video kind of sucks, but it's what it is. It's gotten better. And like I said, this is purely a labor of love, if you will. I'm dying to know the answers to things, and this is basically what I've come to understand. One of the things that Walter sort of kept grilling me about is I kept asking these off-the-wall questions. What about England? What about the Vatican? What about this? And he kept telling me the same answer when it comes to the Caffer. He said nothing else matters. And I'd get so frustrated at that, and I'd just get angry because he wouldn't answer my question. I want to know how we're connected to all this. And he kept saying nothing else matters. Everything you need to know revolves around this one report, and he was right.
So who's behind all of it? Who kind of came up with this and
I say
put it into
banks.
play?
I say the banks.
The history of it goes back to the late 1800s. Actually, believe it or not, there's a whole history that I have found on it, where the guy explains all of the different private associations that were created. In 1946, I believe it was, is when they started doing the Caffer. They started basically making everything uniform. The Federal Reserve Act was a big part of this because, basically the banks were so corrupt, and I believe that they were allowing them to be corrupt so that they could justify the Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve basically organized the crime of all the banks. If you wanted to continue to print funny money, if you wanted to use U.S. currency, you were forced as a banking association to join the Federal Reserve. You didn't have a choice. You were forced to buy the stock of the Federal Reserve, which is not ownership stock. It's just a membership like a Costco card. You don't own any part of Costco, you just are a member, right? That's what the stock in the Federal Reserve is. It has nothing to do with owning anything, and that can be found in the Federal Reserve Act, by the way. So you have a set price for the stock. If you wanted to continue to be a banker, you had to join the Federal Reserve. Those campaign speeches of Woodrow Wilson were actually very much in support of the Federal Reserve System, and then they tweaked his quotes that he used in his campaign series, and they came up with this quote, "I'm a miserable man, I created the central bank." Well, actually, his whole campaign was to create a central bank because the banks were so absolutely corrupt. So everything started getting centralized and federalized, and in 46 is when they literally started passing the laws that said every corporation, every municipal corporation, every government agency has to have a central form called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. And it has to follow certain rules that are created by these private associations.
Hey, guys, we actually have a call coming in from a listener. Do we want to take a call and take some questions?
Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
Oh, we just missed him. Hold on. Let me see if I can get him back on the line here. Vosto, go ahead and give a call again. And
Clint, so if I'm hearing you right, you don't really see a financial collapse because there's really no reason for a financial collapse. I mean, there won't be a true financial collapse. They may propose one or put one out for political benefit, but they'll really ultimately not be a collapse because there's trillions of dollars in these accounts. Is that right?
Well, see, that's my main concern, is that what's going to happen now that they spent decades and decades collecting wealth. And remember, money is not wealth. Okay, they've collected all of the things that actually represent real wealth, which is not the dollar. My concern is that they're going to start either declaring bankruptcies, which they have been doing.
Well, I'm just going to add this call real quick. Hold on.
They're either going to declare bankruptcy, or they're going to shift it all over either back to the corporations themselves or back over to international funds like the International Monetary Fund. And I mean, there's two options. Basically, the people go in and say, okay, we as the people, as the so-called government, have control over all these corporations. We can do what Walter Burien wants. We can start changing that so that we actually can affect how corporations act. Or all that investment wealth is going to go to some outside corporate structure, and we're going to lose every aspect of any wealth that we have at all in this nation. There's two options, basically, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, we've got a caller online. Caller, what's your question?
Yes, I'm actually from another country, if you can clearly see by my accent. I'm very fascinated by your guest here. And I heard that he was the lead designer of Resident Evil. I am a gamer myself. And to this day, of course, I'm just, I'm not. I'm really passionate actually about gaming. And when he said that, this is so demonic, my question is, these games are all, it's fictional. It's fictional characters. It's just like watching a movie. What's the difference from watching a movie to playing a video game,
Well, one of the most sort of misunderstood aspects of controlling people and changing their perspectives is to introduce visual things to the mind. The more violence, the more gore that a child especially sees, the more horrific things that you get used to, then you're actually changing the response of empathy in a person. And I started really comprehending that because I had to watch these scenes over and over and over. I did a movie called Underworld. I did a movie called it had like over 1 million gunshots in it, which was hell, putting all those gunshots in, because that's what we do. It was called, I can't remember. And you see violence over and over and over. And eventually you start realizing that the violence in real life doesn't actually affect you anymore. When you see what's happening in Gaza, for instance, yeah, it bothers you, but the atrocity of it doesn't bother you when you see these children with missing legs and missing arms. You're so used to that in a fictional way that the real thing stops bothering you. So really what it boils down to is empathy. Now, another big part of this, as far as the video games, I met the script writers. I met the actors. I wined and dined the people who were actually in charge of these things. And when I talked to the script writers, they would tell me that they had to change their scripts in order to put a blurb in there that says, "Well, thank God Homeland Security was there to protect us." They had to.
So
they had to change. Yes, it's very. I cannot tell you how much propaganda it is. All of these video games are placing real symbology that is technically a pagan. It is demonic. It is very much Masonic. The concepts that you're seeing on television right now, I recognize from my research, Sleepy Hollow is one of the most. I'm actually, which is a TV show right now on TV. I'm aghast at all the symbology and stuff that's going on in there. They're talking about something that was very real, which was sacrificing humans to the god Molech. Molech is the cow and the bull man and the owl. It's the owl in the female form, the bull in the male form. These are all things that get included in the scripts, and it's to get you used to it. I'm telling you, after spending 7 years in Hollywood and finding out things that I couldn't even have imagined were actually going on, in the background. This is all designed to get you used to.
What about the independent games? The independent games just made by normal people with basically nerds with ideas.
Well, I can attest to you that there is no such thing as independent when it comes to publishing. Okay, now for me to publish a book independently would get me basically blackballed from the entire publishing world, which is exactly what I'm going to do. My book is going to be available only for donation. I'm not going to sell it. Okay, my movies are absolutely free. I cannot work in my industry of choice anymore because I've gone against it. Okay, I'm blackballed. All right, so an independent, Alex Jones calls himself independent. Not exactly. No, he's making $100,000 a week, basically, being independent, and he's the in the top 100 websites or top 1,000. That's at what point does independent? Let's take independent music, for instance, independent bands. Who do you think creates independent labels? And if they are created by independent people, they're eventually sold to the big corporate houses. There is no such thing as independent as far as being available in any way that is quote independent or mainstream. It's illusionary. most people sell out if they are independent.
Clint, let me ask you a question. Have you done any studying of the rock music industry? Because you talk about the symbology. I mean, that is it's just wicked all over the music industry. This whole Illuminati symbolism, I mean, they've just ramped that up into overdrive, it seems like.
Oh, absolutely. I recommend a film that, a couple of years ago I never would have watched this, but since I started actually studying the Bible for what it is, not what a church says it is, not what a corporate structure says it is, but since I looked at the Bible and I figured out that the answers are all in the Bible non-religiously. I mean, it's a code, it's a doctrine, if you will, that if you follow, you find out that the Bible is against government, it's against churches, corporations, it's against persons, which is what all of us are. We're artificial persons. It's against everything that we do. And it's pretty amazing when you actually read the Bible for what it is. That being said, there's a documentary that a couple guys made. It's called, and it's on YouTube, you can find it for free, it's called They Sold Their Souls for Rock and Roll. It's a 4-hour documentary. It goes over all the
what about
quotes.
The pop music? What about the pop music? I think nowadays the pop music is way more worse than rock, and rock actually is banned. You don't see it on mainstream it
doesn't matter.
Before,
just because you put a subtitle on a type of music doesn't make the backbone of it.
It's way more satanic. This Rihanna stuff and all these new artists, they're way more satanic.
They're certainly more blatant with the symbology, and I think part of what this is we kind of grew up in a certain culture, and part of that culture for me was I'll be the first to admit it. I grew up playing Resident Evil, and when you first said you worked on Resident Evil, my first thought was which one, because I went back to that. But the more we wake up,
4 and 5.
Okay, the more we wake up, though, the more we begin to really wake up to what's really happening in the world. I believe that we really have to kind of make decisions. Do we want to know the truth, or do we want to have those things that we were comfortable with when we were plugged into the matrix?
You got to realize something.
Thank you, Paul. We're gonna move on.
Well, like the caller said, he said, this new stuff is way worse. But you see, that's because we've been gradually and incrementally. Incrementalism is a proven method of altering the morals, ethics, and values of a society, of a people. You slowly introduce symbolism. You slowly introduce violence. You slowly, you go look at a movie from the 40s and compare it to a movie of the 70s, and compare it to a movie of the 90s, and now compare to what you're seeing today. You will see the incremental introduction of all this stuff that we're talking about, because now we're so used to it. Our empathy has been basically devastated that we see the symbology and it doesn't bother us, or it bothers us, but we don't do anything about it. You see, that's incrementalism, and that's what happens all throughout politics, all throughout entertainment. The etymology of the word entertainment is to enter and tain or hold the mind, menti. Government is government. Govern or gouvernaire means control. So control the mind, mentis, government. All these things. Entertainment is a very, very important part of the political structure. We treat our politicians as if they're idiots. I've got video of George Bush Jr. as the most brilliant orator you'll ever hear in your life, and yet just 5 years later, he's a complete idiot. No, what he is a professional liar. He's an actor. They're all actors.
John, you've been quiet. JJ, you've been quiet for a while. You got anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I have a special operations tactical background, and one of the things that we studied really in depth was a lot of the work by a Colonel Dave Grossman. He wrote On Killing. He wrote a book called On Combat, and then, of course, he has a seminar series that he teaches to the warrior groups, law enforcement, military, called the Bulletproof Mind series. And it really is dealing with the psychology of warfare, combat, and killing. And he's done a lot of really in-depth studies. And he also has a book called Stop Teaching Our Children to Kill, or Stop Teaching Our Kids to Kill. And in all of his research, he concluded that when he looked at all of the active shooter school shooting situations, they were looking for a common thread, and they came from rich backgrounds, poor backgrounds, rural, urban, everything across the board, Christian families, non-Christian families, and there was one common thread that ran through every single one of them without exception, and that was exposure to violent video games. Now, that does not mean that everybody who plays violent video games becomes an active shooter, but every active shooter was deeply immersed in violent video games.
Well, there's one other common thread that needs to be added to that, because generally you're not going to act on the fact that you've been watching violence. But when you add pharmaceutical drugs, the other common denominator to all of those shooters, every single one of them has been proven to be on some form of antidepressant, which is actually a psychotic. Certain people are missing what is called a cytochrome P450, which is an enzyme that metabolizes those drugs. If you're missing it, and I'm one of those people, if you're missing that and you take one of these psychotic drugs that they mask as an antidepressant or an antipsychotic, just one molecule away from LSD, then those things become reality in your mind. If I take certain muscle relaxers, if I take any kind of antidepressant, which someone gave to me, not realizing I had this issue, I go absolutely start craving mad. Okay, and like what you'd see. And I could see myself literally being in that situation where reality escapes me, because there's about 20% of the population that according to the people I've interviewed about it, that don't have the functionality of their enzyme system, the cytochrome P450 system, to 2D6 is actually an important one, to actually metabolize. They're called non-metabolizers, and so food, alcohol, anything affects them very differently. So you combine pharmaceutical drugs and you combine the violence and the imagery that is presented to them, and yes, that's the end result.
When you were working on some of these games, were you ever asked to add certain symbolism for a certain effect? That was actually a question that was texted over to me.
Since I did sound, no, I didn't deal with any of the imagery. But I'll tell you, the imagery starts getting to you after a while, and you start, well, gee, what is that symbol? Why is it there? Why are they using it? And it's pretty disturbing. A lot of the thing that I noticed the most was the scripting and talking to the writers, how they had to change their scripts, and of course. Here's another aspect of video games and movies. We had this massive sound bank, massive. I mean, the entire sound library of Hollywood, if you can imagine that. And what we do to get the best sound, the screeching and the pain and the horror and the anger that you hear in the roars of dinosaurs and monsters, the alien sound, you know. Well, okay, what happens is we go to a farm. We take our video recorders, or our audio recording equipment, our little, boom mic and everything, and we record the castration of pigs. Pure and utter agony coming from an animal. And you put that in a screech or a scream from some demon character in a video game like Resident Evil, you are constantly being bombarded by pain and suffering. Now, people don't think about the audio as much as they do the video, but any producer worth his salt will tell you that audio is actually more important than video, the imagery. Because if you watch a movie without audio, it's worthless. It does nothing. But if you add the audio, the music, and the effects in there, and you put just pure misery of animals and human suffering, it really, really heightens the experience. And unfortunately, that heightened experience is, again, an empathy killer.
On that note, I come from a design background. My background was all graphic design. I went to 3 different schools. I've done it my whole adult life, mostly print and visual communication. But I always have kind of a conundrum thinking about this. As we're trying to educate people and kind of wake people up out of the matrix, I'm often tempted to try to use some of the propaganda that we've learned about in school and in the industry, than from propaganda by Edward Bernays. What do you think about using propaganda to try to help get the word out, or is that something we should walk away from?
We do every week.
Yeah.
It's the propagation of ideas. It's
Yeah. Propaganda is not in and of itself a bad word. It's the spreading of information, basically. Now, what you spread by the use of propaganda is the subject. So, I mean, I don't see any problem with it as long as your intent is good. The problem that I see is that when things get large, when otherwise good people get big enough to where they have a value, they start selling out. So you might create a propaganda piece that's wonderful, and you start having advertisers, you start getting money for it. This is why everything I do is free. I figured out long ago that in order to have any credibility, everything has to be of no value as far as being able to sell out. So everything I do is free. It's posted. Nothing. I don't charge for anything. So the problem is that trusted names get sold to, as independents, they get sold to major corporations, etc. So you can take any one of the what we think are independent products. Ben and Jerry's is still called Ben and Jerry's, even though it was subsumed by another corporation. Then those guys are dead. All of the seemingly alternative products eventually seem to wind up in the bad hands. So if you create a propaganda piece, you better be willing to stick with it. If you really have a good heart and you really want it to, you better stick with it and not let anybody else get their hands on it.
Clint, we're getting ready to come up on a hard break, and we'll be at the end of the program. First of all, I want to say that, man, it seems like time has flown by. I really been a very interesting conversation. I could have you on for another hour or two, really. Before we go, though, I don't want to leave without giving you a chance to give out your websites again, any Twitter accounts, Facebook pages, list your movies, anything you'd like. You've got the floor.
Well, thanks. TheCorporationNation.com is where I keep my movies for the most part. So again, they're free just on YouTube. I don't charge, and I don't even sell them. So the blog is Reality Blogger. Blogger has one G. realityblogger.wordpress.com, which is where I keep all my hard research. So if you want to know about Caffers, that's basically where I keep all my Caffer research as well. If you the Reality Blogger with one G, if you type that in and then type in a subject, that's the easiest way to find something on my blog. So if you type in Caffer or Caffer School and Reality Blogger, all kinds of stuff will come up. And then my radio show is on Republic Broadcasting Network, 8 to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday. I don't know what else there is to say. My next documentary is called Citizen Enslavement, which is one word, Citizen Enslavement. I don't know when I'll have that out, but again, it'll be free, and hopefully hopefully I'll get my writer's block away and actually go and finish that soon. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, John.
John, I want to thank you today too, John, for being on as co-hosting with us. It was great.
Absolutely,
always enjoy
pleasure.
having you on, man.
And
always
please go ahead and throw out your show information and website as well.
Yeah, we every Sunday evening, 8 p.m. Pacific at radiofreeredoubt.com. That's with a B. Just you Googleize it and it'll pop up. Radiofreeredoubt.com, and those are all archived.
Well, let me say one other thing, just to the benefit of you guys. What I've found is that this information, this Caffer information, is not talked about anywhere. So the way I judge a radio host or any type of news outlet, is whether they talk about the Caffer or not. That is the single thing that lets me know whether they are sincere or whether they're part of the system. If they're not sincere, they're not going to talk about this. So my hat is off to you if you're talking about something that's not supposed to be talked about.
Well, to be honest with you, I didn't know much about it, so I'm glad we had the ability to learn a bit about it.
We're so much not part of the system, I can guarantee you that, Clint. Trust me.
And I think
we're as far from being in the system as it can get.
All three of us can relate to the, struggling to put together a outlet for radio and whatnot. We're all putting together our own shows and know just how hard it is. So please keep up the good work, everyone. And thanks for joining us. We'll be getting out of here just shortly. So.
All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Great. I can't wait to listen to your show. Are you broadcasting tonight, Clint?
I am, and my usual Wednesday guest, if you're interested in the Bible and what this guy's doing up in Canada, he's got the whole damn thing figured out. I'll tell you, he's free, if you will, as free as you can possibly be, using the remedy that is the Bible. I mean, people actually introduce the Bible into court as their law, which is very interesting. So we have this continuing discourse every Wednesday. So yeah, 2 hours I'll be on Republic.
Great, man.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Clint. We'll let you go. Get ready for things.
All right, guys. Take care.
All right. We might have maybe another minute till the show. I think because they messed up the end of the bumper music that, or the beginning, that the end may not go through. So we're at the top of the hour, so we'll let you guys go. Thank you for joining us again on the Liberty Brothers. We will talk to you tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel.
We'll be here.
Call us after, Jason. Talk to you.